Hello, I'm going to read to you the tale of Orpheus. Every now and again, I'm going to stop reading to explain something if I think some of you might be a little confused. And if there's a word I think you guys don't know, I'll stop for a second and tell you what that word means as well. And if you hear the sounds of nature, that's because I'm in my backyard. So enjoy. Orpheus. In the country of Thrace, surrounded by all the best gifts of the gods, Orpheus was born. His father was Apollo, the god of music and song, and his mother the muse Calliope. Apollo gave his little son a lyre, that little harp instrument with strings, and himself taught him how to play it. It was not long before all the wild things in the woods of Thrace crept out from the green trees and thick undergrowth, and from the holes and caves in the rocks, to listen to the music that the child's fingers made. The coo of the dove to his mate, the flute-clear trill of the blackbird, the song of the lark, the liquid carol of the nightingale, all ceased when the boy made music. The proudest trees of the forest bowed their heads, that they might not miss one exquisite sigh that his fingers drew from the magical strings. Neither man nor beast lived in his day that could not be swayed by the power of his melody. He played a lullaby, and all things slept. He played a happy tune, and the flowers sprang up in full bloom from the cold earth, and the dreaming red rosebud opened wide her velvet petals, and all the land seemed full of the lovely echoes of the lilt he played. He played a war march, and afar off the sleeping tyrants of the forest sprang up wide awake, and bared their angry teeth, and the untried youths of Thrace ran to beg their fathers to let them taste battle, while the scarred warriors felt on their thumbs the sharpness of their sword blades, and smiled well content. When he played, it seemed as though the very stones and rocks gained hearts. Nay, the whole heart of the universe became one great, palpitating, beautiful thing, an instrument from whose trembling strings was drawn out the music of Orpheus. I'm going to pause real quick. So this is showing what a gift Orpheus has when he plays his music, how no human or animal or piece of nature can be unaffected to his sound. It's so powerful when he plays his music. Continuing, he rose to great power and became a mighty prince of Thrace. Not his lyre alone, but he also played on the heart of the fair Eurydice and held it captive. That's a young woman. That's her name. It seemed as though when they became man and wife, all happiness would be theirs. But the omens that day were against them. Soon after their nuptials, I'm not sure how to pronounce that word. It means they got married. As Eurydice wandered through the blue-shadowed woods of Thrace, a bold god named Aristeus saw the lovely Eurydice and ran after her, planning to force her into his home. She, afraid of his wild uncouthness, fled. She ran in her terror too swiftly to watch her step, and a poisonous snake that lurked among the fern bit the fair white foot that flitted like a butterfly across it. In agonized suffering, Eurydice died alone in the field, and Aristeus fled when he saw the snake attack. Eurydice's spirit fled to the underworld, and Orpheus, who was the one to discover his wife's lifeless body, was inconsolable in his grief. The sad winds that blow at night across the sea, the sobbing gales that tell of wreck and death, the birds that wail in the darkness for their mates, and the whisper of the leaves of the heavy-clad blue-black cypresses, all now were hushed. For greater than all, more full of bitter sorrow than any, arose the music of Orpheus, a long-drawn sob from the broken man. Grief came alike to the gods and to men as they listened, but no comfort came to him from the expression of his sorrow. At length, when to bear his grief any more seemed impossible, Orpheus wandered to Olympus and there sought Zeus, requesting permission to seek his wife in the gloomy land of the Shades. Zeus, moved by the singer's anguish and a song that celebrated Zeus' defeat over the Titans, granted permission for Orpheus to take the journey to the underworld, but solemnly warned him of the terrible perils of his undertaking. But Orpheus's determination was too intense to know any fear. Thankfully, he hastened to the darkest of caves and soon arrived at the entrance of Hades. For those who don't know, Hades is hell in Greek mythology. Stark and grim was the three-headed watchdog, Cerberus, which guarded the door, and the growls and the furious roaring of a wild beast athirst for its prey, the monster greeted Orpheus. But Orpheus touched his lyre, and the brute, amazed, sank into silence. As he played on and the dog gently licked the singer's feet, he looked up in his face with its savage eyes full of the light that we see in the eyes of the dogs of this earth, as they gaze with love at their masters. On then strode Orpheus, playing still, and the melody he drew from his lyre passed before him into the realms of shadow. So now we're going to hear a little part where Orpheus is playing his music as he goes deeper into hell and Hades. And some of the characters' names you're going to hear are just other famous Greek heroes or Greek characters who were banished to hell. So you might be confused about who is that? But it's just referencing other people who in other stories have been banished to hell and are punished by some horrible task. Surely never were heard such strains. They told of perfect tender love, of unending longing, of pain too great to end with death. Into the blackest depths of Hades the sounds sped on their way, and the hands of time stood still. From his bitter task of trying to quaff the stream that ever receded from his parched and burning lips, Tantalus ceased for a moment. The endless course of Zion's wheel was stayed. Sisyphus gave up his weary task of rolling the boulder and sat on the rock to listen. And Danaids set down their sieves as they passed on their futile task of scooping water. All of the restless shades that came and went in the darkness, like dead autumn leaves driven by a winter gale — gale means a wind — stood still to listen, gaze and listen. Before the throne, where Hades and his queen Persephone were seated, sable-clad and stern, Orpheus still played on. And to Persephone then came the living remembrance of all the joys of her girlhood by the blue Aegean Sea and the fair island of Sicily. Again she knew the fragrance and the beauty of the flowers of spring. The scent of the violet seemed to fill the air, and fresh in her heart was the sorrow that had been hers on the day on which the ruthless king of darkness tore her from her mother and from all that she had held most dear. Silently she sat beside her frowning, stern-faced lord, but her eyes grew moist. I'm going to pause here. Click on the next slide to hear part 2, to hear the rest of the story of Orpheus.